Number 13, Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. This shows up on the wrong side of a lot of people's lists. Much like myself, the general public was not happy that it's not Jason doing the killing. It's a really weird entry in the series, with the whole killing spree starting over a chocolate bar. Yes, a chocolate bar. Adding to the weirdness, the movie just throws so many random characters on the screen just for them to get killed minutes later. I get it, Roy is pissed off at the murder of his son, but why not go after the dude that actually, did the killing? Nonsense aside, and there's a lot of nonsense in this movie, it's actually kind of fun. Most of the kills are unique, well, the ones not bastardized by the MPAA, a recurring theme in these movies. And although he's not Jason, Roy isn't bad. He takes a lot of punishment, racks up an impressive body count, and he's the first Jason to exclusively walk after his victims. Number 12, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. This one is slightly better than I remember it. I always talk about how this movie had a great ending 10 minutes into it. Now, there's a novelization where after Part 8, Jason is swept through the sewers of New York, and then he starts dropping bodies as he makes his way back to Camp Crystal Lake, catching the eye of the FBI, who set up the ambush at the beginning of the movie. I really wish they would have went that way. It just sounds like it'd be so much better than what we got. To this movie's credit, however, it has some really likable characters. Just about every person the movie spends a little time on is unique and fun in their own way. And also another notch in his favor, the gore effects are top notch. Number 11, Friday the 13th, 2009. There's nothing particularly wrong with this entry. It goes back to the basics, but there's just something off about it. Jason is not in space or fighting a dream demon. He's just patrolling Camp Crystal Lake again, killing mostly anyone who gets in his way. He's a lot more brutal and cunning in this one. In most movies, the deaths are relatively quick, unless you piss him off. But in this one, you have the sleeping bag murder, which doesn't really seem like Jason's MO. It seems a lot more brutal than what he's used to. Then you get to the kidnapping, and that's just another thing I wasn't a fan of. The characters aren't anything special, although there are a few standouts. I liked Jared Padalecki of Supernatural fame. Aaron Yu was probably the best character. He played Chewie. But my favorite was the blonde douchebag Trent, played by Travis Van Winkle. He is such an asshole. I hated him when I first watched it, so you know he's great. Also, fun fact, Michael Bay confirmed Trent is the same character as the bully from the first Transformers movies. So Jason and the Transformers are living in the same universe. Number 10, Friday the 13th. This might be a little low for some. Maybe it is, considering it jump-started my favorite horror movie franchise. But have you watched it lately? It's actually pretty boring. There's a lot of filler and it's mostly time wasting. The kills, however, great. Tom Savini's practical effects are outstanding. And while I admit it's boring, once Betsy Palmer actually shows up and she starts acting creepy, the movie starts to shine. The final chase is really good, and on a rewatch, I admit, Jason popping out of the water still makes me jump. Number 9, Friday the 13th, Part 7, A New Blood. This was the start of when the series really started getting out there. It's essentially Jason vs. Carrie as he fights a girl with telekinesis. As cool as that sounds, it's also pretty boring for a lot of it. After Part 6, the director wanted to get back to a scary Jason, and a lot of the silliness was removed. As for the character, the great Kane Hodder makes his debut, who'd go on to play Jason in Part 8, Jason Goes to Hell, and then Jason X. And I have to say, he looks great. Jason's body does look like he's been through hell with his exposed spine poking out through the back and the general decay. This is the scariest looking Jason of the bunch. The film really picks up at the end. Hodder's a stuntman, and the stunts he went through for the character shows why no one outside of him ever played the role more than once. And the final battle is ball to the walls awesome. The ending, hokey as all hell though. Number 8, Friday the 13th, Part 3. Not many people think of Richard Brooker for best Jasons, but it's a shame. He's a big, hulking guy and is really intimidating in a different way than the other people playing the character. Another notch in this movie's favor, it's the first one that Jason actually gets his hockey mask. I like that for something so iconic, how he gets it is almost an afterthought, but he looks badass when you first see him in the mask. Number 7, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. This movie has an undeserved soft spot in my heart. It's the first one I ever remember watching, so to me, this is the definitive Jason. I love the way the mask looks, how he's constantly dripping wet, and how you can't see his eyes. I really like when all you can see is two black holes, almost like there's nothing behind the mask. It's just creepier. I freely admit it's not a good movie. It's actually kind of really bad. It ran out of money, so they spent so much time on a boat in the alleys of Canada because New York is so expensive to film. Still, Jason's teleporting and the goofiest and one of the coolest kills in the series makes it worth the watch. Number 6. Freddy vs. Jason. I have problems with this one. Big problems. Jason being afraid of water still annoys me, the treatment of Kane Hodder pisses me off, and the amount of time Jason gets beat up is frustrating. But the fact that this movie got made at all is very impressive. Jason picks up a huge body count, and for the first time, he actually goes after a giant group of people instead of picking them off one by one when he lays waste to a rave. I didn't care for the portrayal of Jason as a lumbering oaf, but the story surprisingly works. Plus, there's actually a decent amount of Freddy vs. Jason action. In a movie that's titled Freddy vs. Jason, it's nice to see them actually fight. This is rated so highly in my list mainly because of one scene. My smile was bigger when Jason finally got a hold of Freddy in that burning cabin than when Captain America wields Thor's hammer, and I loved that scene. Number 5. Friday the 13th, Part 2. This movie is incredibly underrated. It's Jason at his most human. He gets hurt multiple times, including a kick to the groin that incapacitates him. He runs, and he doesn't tower over anyone. Also, while not the hockey mask, the potato sack makes sense and is pretty scary in its own right. None of the characters really matter except for Ginny, the final girl, and she's awesome. Her final chase with Jason is probably the best in the series, and the movie actually sets up pretty well the sweater trick she uses to temporarily confuse Jason. It's really good and one of the scariest portrayals of the character because this one is the most believable. 4. Never Hike Alone. I reviewed this fan film years ago and I gushed over it. Big time. It even got the coveted 10 Dr. Chainsaws. My one and only complaint was Jason's footsteps were too loud. Other than that, I loved it. It follows a survivalist vlogger who stumbles upon the old camp and runs afoul of Jason. It tells a much smaller story and it's great. Seeing the two of them go head to head was really fun to watch. This dude wasn't some teenager, he was a man who was very capable and intelligent. Plus, seeing Tom Matthews show up at the end as Tommy and call Jason Maggot Head absolutely made me cheer. It's on YouTube and it's only an hour long. Go watch it. Number 3. Jason X. I don't care what anyone says. This movie rules. After we had Jason Goes to Hell and everything that movie wrought, the series definitely needed a shakeup. And what better shakeup for a horror movie franchise than sending it to space? There isn't 1 second of this movie that takes itself seriously, and it's really a blast to watch. It's one of my favorite looks for the character, and he gets even cooler when he turns into Uber Jason. For the first half of it, the movie pretty much has the same plot as Aliens. A bunch of overconfident Marines encounter a threat they don't understand while not listening to the woman who actually has experience with it, and they all get picked off one by one. To be honest, I probably watched this one the most. Number 2. Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. The first time they killed off Jason for good. This one is probably the best made one. It's a lot more polished than the ones that came before, and the acting is really good all the way around. Despite what sounded like hell behind the scenes for the actors, the end product is great. Jason in this one is pissed. Most of the actors portray the character as almost workmanlike. He's there to do a job. Kane Hodder shows off the anger with the heavy breathing, but in Part 4, Ted White plays Jason just all kinds of enraged. These people being alive offends him. There's moments when Jason actually sprints. Other movies where he runs in bits, but this one, he's actually moving. The side characters are also really good. It's the most believable group of people in these movies, and they're a lot of fun, each one of them. And they're not all cannon fodder either. They're all pretty likable in their own ways. And as any review will point out, this is the one with Crispin Glover's hilarious dancing. And I have to say, that man is a treasure. Number 1, and my favorite one, Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. I love this one. It has a very classic horror feel. Tommy and his friend go to a foggy cemetery and dig up Jason's grave, only to accidentally revive him thanks to a bolt of lightning. The opening scene just sets the mood perfectly. Then shortly after that awesome opening, you have a James Bond spoof with Jason as Bond. They let you know early what you're getting into. It's a lot of fun because it's a lot more slapsticky than the rest of the series. Like I said, I love it. Even the soundtrack is great. Although it's odd the counselors are listening to a song about Jason coming back from the dead before running into him. It did the meta horror a decade before Scream did. It's also the first one that actually filled the camp with kids, upping the stakes a bit. It's really good, and even my wife Becca seems to like it. Plus, it has a really great RV crash that ends with Jason just looking super badass standing on top of the flaming wreckage. Well, there you have it, my rankings of my favorite Friday the 13th series. Thank you for watching the video. If you managed to stick around to the end, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the page. You can also find me on Facebook at Mr. Pat's 31 Days of Halloween. Happy Friday the 13th.